When I was doing research for this particular show, I came across this post on one of the many Dota 2 forums out there, and the title pretty much says it all. Winning needs to be rewarded, losing needs to be punished. And they put punished in quotations too. This isn't just me doing air quotes. And when you think about it, this is a very American way to look at things. You know, winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. Second place is the first loser. How many more of these stupid things can I just rattle off? Dozens, it feels like sometimes. It's not enough to just lose, you have to be punished for losing. Let's talk about that. I could easily be accused of picking on Defiance lately, but as I keep on saying, it's become an example of how to get gaming wrong. Now, the system that they're using isn't new, but Defiance is just polite enough to make it somewhat transparent. So, a few patches ago, Defiance instituted a visible score system with individual player scores and larger world events. So, as you play, you're going to see numbers fly up on the side of the screen as a reward for doing the things the dev team wants you to do. It's interesting that just doing damage is not as important as getting random effects kills, opportunistic damage, scoring the killing blow. Now, these points can be usually about 100 to 400 points per bad guy, depending on the circumstance. If you get what they euphemistically called incapacitated, or as the rest of us call it, just get killed, the game instantly hits you with a negative 1,000 point penalty. You also usually take a hit to your armor, making it less effective, and through glitches I've also lost ammunition too. If you self-revive or another person revives you, there's no further penalty, but if you have to self-extract, the game rocks you with a further minus 2,000 points, as well as a money penalty. Wait, hang on. I need to say one thing before we continue on here. I know that in the games we all call it a death penalty, but for the sake of this video I'm calling it a failure penalty. Now the reason is that, well, number one, you don't die in MMOs, you get to come back and have another go at it. And also, second of all, when I talk about death penalty, I usually think of things like capital punishment. So that's why we're having a slight change of wordplay. Failure penalties like this are not unique to Defiance. Every MMO has some kind of penalty for being, well, killed on a mission. Lately, it's been in the form of armor damage, which you have to spend in-game currency to get it repaired. If it's a boss fight, you're also kicked out of the arena so you can't rejoin your teammates, so you're being denied game time. I've also seen console RPGs that make you lose your gear, your items, basically dropping you back at the beginning of the level all but naked. In fact, one of the things I hear from the hardcore, so-called old-school gamer crowd is that these new gamers are coddled because they have it so hard, or the failure penalties were harsher back in the day. I find it hilarious that for most of these people they think old school gaming is PlayStation 2, but we'll come back to this. I really want to hit what's going on here first. So to do that, we need to talk about B.F. Skinner. Now if you're a psychology person, I apologize now for the sweeping generalizations I'm about to make, but I've only got so much time for this show. Deal with it. Just grit your teeth. Skinner coined this term called operant conditioning, which means that you can alter somebody's behavior through positive or negative reinforcement. Now, gaming runs on two of these principles: positive reinforcement and negative punishment. Okay, so it runs on more than those two things, but just go with it for right now. Let's go over those two concepts really briefly here. A positive reinforcement is, well, what you think it is. You get a reward for doing something that the game wants you to do. The game wants you to shoot at the same bad guy your teammates are. It gives you points for doing that. Stimulus response. Simple. Negative punishment, on the other hand, works a little differently. It relies on something good being taken away from the person as immediate repercussions for their actions. Now, in the case of Defiance, a minus 1,000 point penalty, then another minus 2,000 points if you have to extract. The negative punishment has levels of severity. Now, as I said before, some games make you lose all your gear, or even just some of it, or your armor's destroyed, or whatever. I always kind of find it funny in a sad way that people will suddenly become apologists and defend these failure penalties in their favorite game. I could get into Stockholm Syndrome, but that's another thing entirely. They have several points of contention, but their biggest one is that failure needs to be punished because without that punishment, players will have no incentive to get better. Alright, you want to play that game? Sure, let's play. Coin Op. Punch the Wayback Machine, we're going back to the heyday of arcades. In the sense of failure penalties, these machines were brutal. Failure meant the entire level got reset, and you had to begin again with none of your progress saved. Later on, some games would save your progress, but it would reset everything, so you had to... Okay, yeah, I'm using a Google Doodle, but it's the closest to the old arcade Pac-Man I could find on short notice. What's even more brutal is that the old-school arcade games had no win condition. You played the game knowing full well you were going to eventually fail. You want a brutal game, go find a missile command machine. And yet, we played anyway. We didn't need to have points taken away from us to give us an incentive to not fail. The ability to just keep on playing worked just fine. You want to know what made these arcade games even more brutal? The literal price of failure. 25 cents. Yeah, everybody about my age is kind of nodding their heads going, yeah, I know how much my allowance went down those coin slots. So if you youngins want to talk about the brutal price of failure, yeah, you, me, an arcade game of Tempest, and bring coins. These things are just garbage. It does lead to a question that needs to be addressed. Did this literal price of failure make us play better? For the majority, no. Players obviously do not get better when the failure penalty is harsh. It was taken as just part of the game experience that you will fail, and it'll probably be in the first few minutes. I could even argue that arcades could not have lasted if people did get exponentially better because of the failure penalty. Coin-op games figured this out really quickly, and they started offering a continue feature for another 25 cents, so you could just pay to pick up where you left off. Quarter eaters. Talk about the price of failure. Those games actually set you up to fail. As an integral part of the game, they needed to soak you for more cash the entire time. House of the Dead, anyone? But let's scale this back to the home market. What happens when this price of failure hits you in something like, I don't know, an MMORPG? Well, a couple things. This is the part of the show in which you get to see my bias. I am not a fan of harsh failure penalties. Let's take this to the modern RPG and MMORPGs. Does a failure penalty make people play better? I'm going to argue not really. Failure is a part of gaming. You try something, it doesn't work, so you try it again. And this is what makes gaming so good in my opinion, because it teaches people if you keep at things, eventually you're going to find a way to overcome a situation, and in the broadest sense of things, that's the good message. You can quickly learn from your mistakes and come out on top. Don't give up. Another life lesson game teaches us is that often you fail because of somebody else's actions, or inactions for that matter. Allowing this failure in a relatively safe situation teaches people how to deal with it in the real world. What I'm getting at is that adding a failure penalty on top of failure itself does not provide an incentive to just not fail. It adds undue pressure to not fail. Okay, so if you don't know what the difference is, an incentive is when somebody says, come on, you can get up, you can win this thing. Pressure is when somebody says, you better get back up and you better win this thing or I'm going to kick your ass. Which do you think is going to work better? But that doesn't really answer the question of if failure penalties work or not. In my experience, they don't, for several reasons. The first thing that happens is, well, it becomes the price of doing business. People simply just accept that failure in a game will cause their gear to break or vanish, so the incentive to get better just doesn't exist. You throw your money into the money sink, you just keep on playing. I could make a case for learned helplessness, but the second thing that happens is that players will exercise their free will. In gaming, players can walk away from your game if the price of failure is not proportional to the perceived reward for the task. Defiance has this problem in spades right now because of the sliding scale, the clown car enemies. Many players just don't do world missions. They know the failure penalties will erase their positive points earned, and just the world missions are a waste of time, so they simply don't show up. Another thing that happens is social pressure. Failure penalties affect everyone on the team, so when it starts to go sour, everyone literally has to pay the price. Players get tired of wasting their in-game resources because of other people. Whether they're trolling, they just don't have the skill, they don't have the knowledge, it doesn't matter. One thing I've learned is when people start asking what's your combat rating and do you people even know how to do this, that's when the finger pointing is about to begin and the group will disband within 10 minutes. Every time. Point blank. Putting a failure penalty on top of the failure itself is not going to make a player, in the vernacular, stop sucking. But the thing is, I hear a lot of the hardcore players say, back in my day when the failure penalties made you want to play better, you had to play better. We learned how to play these games, damn it. Okay, game on. I will offer you a challenge. Play old school style. Before you embark on an adventure, quickly tally your inventory. If you die or get knocked out or whatever you want to call it, all the money and gear you earned gets destroyed. Or hell, let's go pure old school mode and just delete the character. You know, that tune you spent months or years playing, all those achievements, all the gear, all the money you've spent on it, gone. If the old school gaming days were so much better, put your money where your mouth is, play it that way. You're not going to do it. Because you know, just as well as I do, the old days of gaming sucked. No. You're going to play with the modern, less punishing way. Happily do so, mind you, while the entire time berating any new players for saying, oh, you're a bunch of pansies. Okay, let me put it this way. If you're going to play in the modern system and not play the old school way and complain about it, you're just a hypocrite. There. I said it. I feel better. Moving on. I like to try to come up with solutions, but in this case it's kind of out of the gamers' hands and in the hands of the dev teams. I don't think that game companies understand that failure in itself is punishment enough, and we don't need to have resource deprecation added on top of that. We don't need game pressure to complete missions. Winning the mission is quite enough reward, thank you large. The only thing that we can control is our own actions. What I mean by that is adding social pressure on top of the in-game pressure doesn't help anyone. Failure is a part of gaming. It's what makes the eventual triumph that much more rewarding. Having teammates literally breathing down your neck and literally screaming at you in chat about how much of a failure you are, that doesn't help anyone. So you wiped. The person that made the mistake already feels bad enough. You don't need to make them borderline suicidal on top of it. There is one last thing I want to return to here. In MMOs, a common failure penalty is to have your armor get damaged. At a certain percentage, it protects you less effectively until it's utterly destroyed. At that point, you have to get it repaired. Now, I mention this because in most instances, they don't have a repair facility located in a convenient place, if at all. So the failure penalty is you have to leave where you are, go out, and go find a place to repair. Enter the repair bot. In World of Warcraft, Velvel used to have one because, well, as an engineer, he could just build them. In other MMOs like DCUO, anyone can obtain a repair bot. For a fee. Cash shop item. Costs about $1 US per robot. The only things missing from this is a countdown timer, a continue screen, and a credit card swiper on top of the monitor in order to take my money. Give them a year, they'll figure out how to do it. Just a quick bloggy-style post to let you all know this. So this channel does have a Patreon page, and if you're interested in directly supporting the show, you can find it at patreon.com/tiger, spelled with a Y, of course. Now, if you're not familiar with it, Patreon is sort of electronic tipping. You can set the amount you wish to tip with every video that I make, and you can set a monthly limit if you think I'm going to be going the 5 videos a day Let's Play style, which I'm not. Now, as a thank you for your support, I've set up some behind-the-scenes stuff like screenshots and update posts for the patrons of the series. Now, the funding is going to be put directly back into the show in the form of new hardware, higher production values, off-site locations, and so on. And I don't want to make any promises, but it might also be used for funding things like going to conventions, depending on the support we can get. Now, I do want to emphasize something. This does not mean that the show is going pay-only or similar. As long as I have control of the show, it's never, ever going to go that route. This is just an opportunity for you folks to support the show directly if you so desire. So, if you like the show and you want to help it out, the link is on the screen right now, and you can probably find more information over at Patreon. Thank you very much, and I'll see you guys next episode.